Hello, and thanks so much for joining us for another edition of Mid-American Gardener. I'm your host, Tanisha Spain, and joining me today are three of our panelists here to answer your questions and show you some of the things that they brought from their garden. So having them introduce themselves, let's see, we've got the two for one. So let's start with Ella and Karen. Why don't you guys introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about where we can find you outside?
Okay, I'm Ella Maxwell. I'm up here in Tazewell County. I'm a Tazewell County Master Gardener and a horticulturist, and I enjoy vegetable gardening, flower gardening, trees and shrubs. I've got a pretty big garden, and I've got some insect problems I'm going to share today.
All right, Karen?
Hi, and I'm Karen Ruckel. I'm a horticulturist in the Peoria area, and I have a small, manageable garden. And I love to do houseplants, perennials, lots of perennials.
Awesome. And Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen Nelson. I'm a horticulturalist, and you can find me online at groundedandgrowing.com. I like a little bit of everything, but my favorite things are vegetable gardening and houseplants.
So we've got the big garden lady, we've got the small garden lady, we've got the container garden lady. We've got a nice mix of just about everybody here on the show today. Awesome. Okay, so as normal, we'll start with our show and tells. So, Jen, how about we start with you? What'd you bring today?
Okay, my examples today are all accidents that happened at my house. Sometimes the best laid plans go a little bit astray when you get busy. But this is a plant, a mini monstera. Also, the Latin is Rhaphidophora tetrasperma. I bought it last summer and it grew like crazy. And Tanisha, this is the one I gave you a start of. And it was growing so well inside, and I wanted to make a little pole for it to climb up. And I set it outside, intending to get to it, when I had time. And it got blown around in a storm, and it broke some of these big, long, beautiful stems. And so instead of just throwing it away, I'm trying to propagate them. And I learned last summer that these are really a lot easier to propagate in water. I tried using rooting hormone and putting them in damp soil, and they just didn't do anything until I just put them in water, plain old water, for a while, and then potted them up once the roots got going. So that's my first mistake, or my first accident of the day.
The one that you gave me is still going strong though, so just
Good.
wanted you to know it's hanging on and in good hands. Now you've talked before about how water roots and soil roots are not the same. So when you do eventually move that to soil, will you do any pruning, root pruning, or anything to kind of get that ready for the transition?
Well, I'll try to do it sooner rather than later. It looks like it's getting close to, you don't want it to be like feet of roots. You don't want it to be filling that vase that I have it in with roots. You want just a 2 to 3 inches. In my experience, that's been easiest. And maybe put it in a Ziploc and give it some extra humidity until you see some new growth.
Oh, now that I haven't tried before. So you mean put the root end in a Ziploc?
Well, potted up in soil, and it's got to grow some new roots to establish in that soil. Put that whole pot in a large Ziploc, just to kind of baby the
Oh.
plant a little bit. You would do the same thing with other methods of propagation, just to lessen how much it's drying out.
Give it that sort of greenhouse
Yeah,
feel within
yeah.
the, okay, interesting. I've never thought of that before. I've done the moist paper towel, but not the entire thing, like a small pot. So,
Yeah, you do need to keep an eye on it. Make sure it's not too wet, because too much moisture could start rot happening. But just keep an eye on it. You don't want it to dry out at this point.
okay. All right. We'll check back in with you later for your second happy accident. Okay, on to the dream team here, the duo, dynamic duo. Which one of you would like to go first with your show and tell?
Oh, I'll show my insects. Okay, so if you go out in my garden, this is what some of my coneflowers look like. There is no flower left. So I cut these this morning. I think that you can see that it's dark. And that is caused by a little weevil. So there is a a small insect, and I got him here. Oh,
Oh, you brought the insect on the
well,
show.
I got a whole bunch of them. But anyway, here's the coneflower, and you
Hmm.
can see where it's been. This little weevil has a snout, so I got him on a piece of tape. Okay, right there. So maybe you
Hmm.
can see his little snout. But
Wow, I
there's
can see
male
that
and
really good,
female.
actually.
It's important to identify the insect, but what they do is they feed on the stem enough for it to just break off or sometimes just hang over. And then they come and they mate in the cone and they lay larvae, and those hatch and feed inside this cone head that's fallen over, and then they pupate and they won't emerge until next year again. So this insect has a single life cycle, one generation per year. The adults will not see the babies. This is what it looks like inside. It's blackened, and there'll be a little white grub-like larva here. And you can see I think you can see them on there.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
anyway, they make these little marks, and then it just falls over. So there are no chemical sprays to control this insect, because the time that it would be most vulnerable is also the time that the flowers are open, and we do not want to contaminate the flowers for other pollinators that are using their resources. So the best thing that you can do is you can take a little container with some soapy water. You go out early in the morning and you pick off these broken over heads, and you can drop them into the soapy water. And so you control the adult generation by drowning them. And then you also dispose of the flower heads, which would be next year's. So last year I had a whole bunch, had to find out what it was. And that's the first important thing, is to find out and properly identify the insect, and then the control strategies. And for this one, it's just mechanically picking them off to reduce the population for the following season.
I have a question. Is that specific to coneflowers? Because I'm seeing some damage like that in my sunflowers.
No, it's not. Coneflower is one of the plants that they will visit. They'll also go to the silphiums, like the cup plant. They can also do that kind of damage on sunflowers as well. So what you want to do is check early in the morning when the adult insect is still on the flower or the flower head, and you want to look for those little dark dings where their little snout pierces the stem, because this is what you're going to end up with. And again, I'm not going to spray any insecticide, but I'm going to physically remove and try to reduce the number of adults and the potential for next year's generation.
Interesting. And will you see on one plant, will you see several of these, an infestation of these, or is this just maybe one or two that can do this much damage in one area?
It's there's several larvae inside the head, so many adults will emerge. And so it's primarily the female that notches the flower head, but she will mate with the male
Hmm.
little weevil to be able to lay a fertilized egg. So
Gotcha.
I've caught them in the soapy water where there'll be two of them together. So I got, the pair.
Mom and dad, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's good information because I know a lot of people are probably going out wondering what the heck's going on and why are my flower tops drooping over or falling off. So great info. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, Karen, we're on to you.
Well, and I wanted to talk today. We're getting to that time period for harvesting garlic. And my garlic, what I did is I don't have a lot of room in my garden. So this year I did them in an old nursery pot. So what I did was just it's about a 15-inch nursery pot. I think it was number 10 size, what they used to call number 10. And I put landscape fabric in the bottom of it last fall, filled it with a container soil mixture, because then I'm not going to have it in the ground. It's going to be a container. And then I planted my garlic cloves into the container. And but knowing that the garlic, you just can't have this sitting outside and freeze. The garlic wouldn't like that above ground. So what I did is, in my garden, everything was done in the garden. So I healed it in, and I dug a hole and sunk the pot down into my garden, covered it with a little straw, and then just forgot about it until spring. Then spring, when it was time to actually do stuff in my garden, I yanked the pots up out of the ground, stuck them on a landscape wall in the yard, and just let them go on growing. So then at least harvest was easy, because I just dumped them out of the pots. So right now I've got, out of my 2 pots, I've got a good amount. So now I'll let these dry down completely. I don't need to leave the roots or the stems. I just, this is the whole plant intact. So, they were kind of tall. So they took
Oh
up,
gosh.
some space. So at least they weren't space in my garden.
Those look
And like I said,
amazing, Karen. They look
I'll
very
dry,
healthy.
yeah, I'll dry them down. And so this is one of them because I harvested them early enough, I still had the skins completely encompassing the cloves. And that's what you want, because if you harvest them too late, all of the skin will be down to this point, and you'll actually then kind of have a dirty garlic cloves. So one clove that I planted last year then produced a head that has about 5 decent cloves on them. So it was a good way for me to have fun with growing garlic, but not letting it take up a lot of space, because I don't have a lot of space to give to something like garlic.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you help us understand the difference between hard and soft neck, and which one is better for our growing zone? And if you don't know, this could just be a group affair. But I personally, I have trouble knowing the difference, and so I can't be the only one. So tell
Well,
us a little bit about garlic and type.
well, and the thing is, garlic is one of those things. I don't know how many times through the years I've read about them, and read different articles and all the different stuff behind it, and then I completely forget it. But in our area, typically we would plant the hard neck. And so a hard neck is down through my clove. This middle stem is very defined, and it's thick. This is what's a hard neck. And Ella, we were talking before we came on today, in the grocery store, what you get typically is soft necked. This middle area is completely gone, and really doesn't have much to it. So it just seems to be, in our area, the hard neck does better. Now with my garlic, I did not purchase it. I got it from my friend last fall, who gave me some of her grown garlic, and then I broke it apart and planted them in my pots.
Awesome. All right. Anybody else want to chime in? Anybody else growing garlic or have any tips? No? Okay. All right. Thank you, ladies. Okay, Jen, we're gonna go back to you with your next accident.
My next happy accident that I wasn't so happy when I discovered. It was literally the same day I bought a new little succulent that I have in a little rack on my kitchen counter under a grow light. I noticed some leaves were scattered on the counter, and I asked my kids, and they just looked at me and said, "Not me." So when I get my hands on "not me," he's gonna be in trouble. But this is from a succulent called Bear's Paw, and they were just broken leaves. Turns out somebody in my house might have been climbing on the counter to try to get at the candy that's in the top of the cabinet. but we don't have that on video, so we're not exactly sure. I'm just basing it on past activities. But so these broken leaves, instead of throwing them away, I just set them on the counter and let them dry off, because being a succulent, you need it to callus over is the term, so before you can try to propagate it. And these actually started growing roots as they were sitting on my counter. So I will get a little small container of soil and just plop those roots into the soil, and I should get a teeny tiny plant growing right around this area. But I have 3 of them that have all done to differing degrees the rooting. This one was not really broken off at the base of the leaf. It was broken more in the middle, but it still made the little rootlets. Usually you get better rooting if you have the base of the leaf intact, and this one did too. So
Do you
I
use
don't
any moisture or anything as you're trying to root those? You just kind of,
know.
what about light?
These were sitting under the same grow light that the rest of these little succulents in the kitchen are under. I literally found this happy accident and just set these leaves aside, intending to do something with them, and forgot about them. And then I looked at them this morning when I was making breakfast, and I said, "Oh, look, they have roots, and I need a show and tell today." So
And it just worked out. And the
it
cycle
all worked.
continues, right?
That's right. That's right.
And Not Me makes visits to my home as well. So I think he makes the rounds, and tries to get our kids into trouble. So thank you,
Yeah.
Jen. All right, we're going back to Karen with another show and tell item.
Well, this goes right back with what Jen was saying about, this wasn't a happy accident, but talking about succulents. Out in my yard, I've got some sort of sedum. I have no idea now what variety it was. But a couple weeks back, the plant was getting quite leggy. And there's a lot of perennials that benefit from a pinching early in the season, just nipping out the growth out of the top to help get them a little sturdier, a little fuller. And especially if you hadn't done that, a lot of these rains, plants have fallen over with the weight. So I went around to this plant and I nipped off all these long shoots on it to help take it back a little bit in height and sturdy it up. And I had this pile of number of these, and I thought, boy, it sure would be nice to propagate them. And I'm like, I'll get to it later. And so I just left them laying in the yard there by the plant. 2 days later, I came back and I'm like, hey, look, these still look okay. So I went ahead and actually potted them up and didn't throw them with the landscape. And because once again, a succulent, that callousing over helped. You don't want a lot of moisture because they have so much with them. And I am starting, a couple of them I can tell they have rooted because I am starting to get some new growth. But I didn't really do much extra. I put them in potting soil, had it lightly moist, lightly watered them afterwards, and then have just left them completely alone, sitting in a shaded area. So now I have more of this sedum to give to somebody else.
There you go. More of the mystery sedum. Now, is it good? Because Ella, you gave me some sedum earlier this year, and I did cut them back just a little bit, and boy, have they really flushed out. Is there any certain time that it's too late to do that in a growing season? If someone watching this sees this today, is it okay to do in July, or is that something you should do in the fall or in the spring?
Well, July is getting a little dicey because we're already to mid-July, and some of these plants we start seeing that fall blooming, even though it's not fall, in August. So it's really almost a little too late. So it's not going to hurt the plant if you did that. The problem is you would delay that growth and that flowering, and then if the flowering is delayed too long and we've got a silly fall that we get an early frost, you might miss out on all that flowering. Now, the thing is, if something happens that the plant gets broken or stepped on or crushed or somebody came by, you could go ahead and propagate it and it would still survive. It's just where your blooming would be. So it's more that spring to probably mid-June, a lot of these perennials, and it's actually you're remembering. So remember from last year, what was kind of annoying in the yard, what got a little too tall or too leggy and then didn't stand up to storms or wind. And then that's what you need to remember next spring to catch them when they're only about 6 inches or so. nip them back, and that flushing, then the plant's sturdier and fuller through the whole growing season.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. All right, Ella, we're going to go to you. Question number 48, DJ. This is regarding hydrangea rust, or what someone thought was hydrangea rust. They sent in some photos. This is from Sue Ellen Frederick. Pictures I found on the internet for hydrangea rust don't look like what I found on my leaves. Is this what it is, and how do I treat it? Love the show and have watched it for years. So we've got a picture. And so, Ella, what are your thoughts there?
Okay, well, when I saw this picture, hydrangea rust is not something that I'm very aware of, and I don't think it's a problem in central Illinois. All the rusts have they have an alternate host, and so some of the damage will be on one plant. The spores are released. It is a fungus, and then it'll go to another plant. And I'm not sure of the life cycle, but I do know that on all of the rusts, the spores come from the underside of the leaf. And the reason that it's referred to as rust is because the spores are kind of powdery and orange. And so to really identify rust as the disease problem, we would want to see a picture of the underside of the leaf, and I don't think we're going to find that in the picture that she sent in. But there are a lot of other fungal diseases, and sometimes on hydrangeas, because they're so dense and full, there may not be good air circulation, and this could be the result of some other leaf spot disease. And again, most of the leaf spot diseases aren't that serious. It's when the leaf disease then goes down the stem and then, or down the leaf to the stem and causes the stem to die, then it becomes much more serious. So I would tell her that the best thing to do is, she's already picked these leaves off, just remove them, dispose of them, and wait to see if any further ones come. There are different fungicides on the market, but I doubt that spraying would really be necessary. But it is important to be able to identify the disease either by the symptom or the sign of the, the rust pustules on the bottom. And I don't think it's rust, and I don't think she has anything to worry about. And I'm sure her hydrangea is just beginning to bloom, and it's going to look beautiful.
Well, and that's another thing to talk about with hydrangeas, is that earlier in the summer when we're so hot, is when you water, don't get the leaves wet. The leaves don't need to be washed off. Water the base of the plant, because then you are keeping it drier, not irritating if there is a problem with some fungal diseases.
Okay. All right. Thank you, ladies. We've got about 3.5 minutes left. We're going to go to question 53. This one's for Jen. This one's a jam-packed one here. So this is a husband and wife debate. The wife always buys a product that is designed to boost blooms. Her husband buys a standard product, and she wants to know if there is a difference. Will I get better blooms from the bloom product or just the standard? So let's start there. What are your thoughts as far as those products go?
My thoughts are they are usually different. Usually something marketed as a bloom boosting fertilizer, the three numbers on it are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Usually on the bloom boosting fertilizers, that middle number is higher. And so it's to enhance blooming. Phosphorus enhances blooming. In some markets, you can't buy those anymore because phosphorus is also a water pollutant that fosters like algae and other things growing in our waterways. So they're not as easy to find as they used to be. But the moral of the story is I think they're both are perfectly acceptable. And the best fertilizer to use is the one that you will actually use. And so whichever one is easier to apply and you actually use it with some regularity and it doesn't just sit collecting dust in your garage, I would say is the best one. And maybe
Way
Ella
to
and
avoid
Karen
a marital
Yes.
She got a
Houses
thumbs up from
and
Ella. Yes,
yeah.
yes. The second part of that
Okay.
question was she has a friend who uses Irish Spring soap as a pest deterrent. I have heard this before. So what are your thoughts on this?
We have used it with a lot of success at our house. We have deer in particular that used to just frequent the sort of the back edge of our yard where we weren't really back there, but now they've gotten braver and braver, and I've seen them right up next to the house, probably because of a lot of construction going on in our area. But the Irish Spring works really well because it's very heavily scented, and the deer can't smell they depend on being able to smell predators and danger coming their way, and if they're just inundated with Irish Spring smell, as nice as that might be, um, it makes them nervous because they can't tell if danger's in the area. And one way to conserve it, we use a drill and drill right through the bars of soap and then thread some twine through it and put it on trees and shrubs that they like to destroy. They for a while were. It seems like when we first plant shrubs, they like to mess with them and eat them, but as they grow to a certain size, they leave them alone. But the Irish Spring works.
Okay. All right. We're out of time, ladies. Thank you so much for sharing your time and talents with us today. And we will see you next time. And thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.